Hello and a really warm welcome to video 6 of Life Unlimited, 10 Steps to Real Change. And in this video, it's an extension, continuation of knowing yourself. In the last video, I talked about the first aspect of that, which was your thoughts. And in this video, I'm moving on to feelings. So getting to know your feelings. What are feelings? Well, I would say feelings are messages from your being, body, which tell you what to go towards and what to come away from. They tell you in any given situation and any experience that you're in, with any person that you're around, whether you're in or whether you're out. I've already talked about it in the context of the, connection, reward and threat feelings, but the connection ones will be telling you when to attach, so to go towards and attach, the love, passion, joy, and the other extreme. The threat ones will be telling you what to avoid, what to come away from, with fear, hatred, revulsion, disgust. Anger, of course, as part of threat, will say to go towards and fight, but largely, if something's consistently making you angry, that threat thought of anger ought to be telling you to come away from somebody. So important, as you can see here. And we want to make decisions about life. If you want to know who you should be around, if you want to know what you should be doing with your time, if you want to know what to fill your day with or what not to fill your day with, what job to go for, what job not to go for, you need to know what you feel. There is a big cliche about therapists asking clients what they feel. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? The reason for that is that the part of us which we most come away from is our feeling function. I mean, I've talked about it a bit in the past about how this happens, and I'm going to go on to just recap on that in a minute. But as you'll probably can imagine, or if you're in therapy or know people that are, what brings people into therapy generally is an aspect of feeling. So it would be, if it's anxiety, it would be fear, it could be chronic anger, which is obviously anger, depression, which would be being underwhelmed by feeling lost or stuck, so not having access to that felt experience of knowing where to go or what to do. Bereavement would be about grief, loss. Addictions, often people trying to change what they feel, either to calm themselves down or to feel more alive. So what happens if we get out of relationship with our feelings, which is what most of us do, if we aren't able to get the messages from them, if we aren't living a life that at least in part is taking their messages into account, they tend to fight back and we get emotional symptoms which we then need to deal with. So important in living this lived life unlimited that we know from moment by moment what's happening within our bodies, and we are taking in that information that's coming from our bodies, that's coming from our feelings, and using it to decide what we do in life and who we're around. So how do we get out of relationship with our feelings? Generally, I've already talked about it a bit, as I said in the past, as far as how dominant threat comes into play for a lot of us. It's with caregivers who being around them means that we have to come away from what we feel or disconnect with our felt experience. So we may get messages as we're growing up that certain feelings are unlovable. So anger is often one that's quite unacceptable in children to their caregivers. But anger is a boundary emotion. So anger is an emotion that does tell the child, it's so important from information as to what it wants to do or not want to do. But it's often unacceptable to caregivers. Tears can be, I'll talk about that a bit in a minute as well. Often caregivers will struggle to contain a child's sadness, so will want them to stop crying as quickly as possible. This may be continued amongst friends at school, teachers as well. But I think the wider environment, generally going through that process of being conditioned during primary school, secondary school to fit within an external environment, requires a lot of outward in, requires us to make decisions about what we're going to do based on what other people might think, what other people want for us, other people's values. And some of that might absolutely be in accordance with what we feel, but some of it may not, a lot of it may not. And then we're left having to come away from what we feel. And then we're left going into life, separating from our parents, trying to make decisions based on not knowing what we love and don't love, not knowing what we're angry about, what we're not angry about. So you can really see how this process gets set up and how it gets continued through life. Certain feelings being told that they're unlovable or lovable, acceptable or unacceptable. Childhood beliefs like, boys don't cry, put a smile on your face. So that one, going very quickly to smiling, even though that may not be what you're feeling. So that incongruence between the facial expression to please other people, to be acceptable to other people, but actually the difference between that and what may be happening for somebody internally as far as their felt experience. It may be, the message might be given to children that's showing certain feelings is weak, particularly perhaps around sadness. Love we've already talked about. Emotional can be used as an insult, so that person's too emotional, too sensitive. Of course, we don't want a child to be overwhelmed by its feelings, so it does need help with that. We do need to manage certain feelings, certainly as children, carrying on as adults as well. But I don't think we do that by turning away from feelings. We certainly don't do that by coming away from our feeling function and trying not to feel anything, because it's not possible to feel nothing. You can't come away from anger, fear, sadness and not come away from love and excitement. So if you cut off from feeling generally, because you don't want to feel certain painful feelings, you will also cut off from those feelings that you enjoy. So you will cut off from the painful feelings, which would probably be telling you what to come away from throughout life, but you will also be cutting off from those enjoyable feelings that will be telling you what to go towards. As we're growing up, love may be seen by threat and by dominant threat caregivers as sentimental or soft. Tears, the messages can often be that they are babyish, self-pitying, manipulative, those kind of things. But we'll go on in a minute to talk about how important tears are, how important sorrow for self, sorrow for others, empathy for self, empathy for others, how important that is. That's for connection, feeling, sorrow, self-sorrow. So as I said, if we want to enhance those connection feelings along with the love, along with the joy and the pleasure, the sorrow, the self-sorrow really need to be felt too, really need to be felt. So threat and caregivers who are in dominant threat, and if we've grown up in that environment, it would be important. The message that would be given is to separate you from what you feel, because you don't need feelings to survive, which is all threat's doing. What you need to be able to do is please your caregivers, is please your environment, often despite what you're actually feeling. But what the trouble is, that weakens the value of your thoughts if you don't know what you're thinking. As I said, you're making decisions based on what other people think, what other people have told you what to do, what other people are doing, so what seems acceptable, based on what you worry what other people will think about you. So your thoughts have lost some value because they haven't got those internal messages. Your thoughts don't have those bottom-up messages from your body and from your feelings to decide where you should go and what you should do, to decide who you should be around and who you shouldn't be around. So a lot of people, if that's happened for them, often a place of dominant threat, but also dominant reward as well, they feel lost, stuck, because they've lost these important signals, that they feel like they're going through the motions in life because actually they're living somebody else's life a lot. Now, of course, what other people say you should do and other people's values, as I say, may be in alignment with what you want to do as well. They may be congruent with your internal felt experience of things, but they may not. And the point is here, we need to be able to tell whether that's the case or not. And from this point, if we haven't been doing that in the past, live a life which is in accordance with our thoughts and also our feelings and our body and what our feelings are telling us to do. We don't want our feelings in hiding, which may have been what's happened in the past. And if that happens during early experience, during those sort of primary school, secondary school years, what tends to happen then is it gets carried on through life, as with anything. Work will often reward a lack of feeling, will reward dissociating or being able to come away from what you feel. You have to often, some people do a job that they absolutely love, which is wonderful, but a lot of people don't. Therefore, they're doing something which they might often feel bored in or frustrated in or stressed in. So the idea of loving what they do and being around people that they love and feeling passionate about what they do is just not something they've ever experienced. And what does that mean? They are not spending most of their time doing something which they want to, from a feeling point of view, do. And people can carry that on with their romantic relationships as well. If they've had a childhood where relationships had criticism, complaint, those sort of threat experiences, they might remain in romantic relationships, even friendships, despite what they feel. And it's not only at work, therefore, that we carry on doing despite what we feel, we get rewarded for doing that. It's something that we have to do often. And as I say, financially rewarded, even promoted. A sort of lack of empathy for self, so a lack of awareness of what I feel, a lack of listening to what I feel, can get me a promotion because I carry on working for long hours despite what I actually want to do. Very much gets rewarded for people. So what we're trying to do, as with thoughts, is where we're going to make feelings an ally now. In order to make them an ally, we need to bring them into awareness. We need to know what we're feeling, and I'll talk about that in a minute too, and therefore have some control over them. Same way with thoughts, we're going to be enhancing those ones we want more of: the love, the gratitude, the passion, the joy, calmness, contentment, and managing those ones, those sort of dominant threat ones where fear is starting to feed itself and catastrophize, or anger is feeding itself. So we need to take the message, as ever, from the threat ones, but not allow them to consume us. We don't want to be consumed by our feelings or struggling to live a life that ignores them. And when I say live a life, if you are not aware of what you're feeling, if you're not taking those messages from feeling into account when you make your decisions about what you're doing or who you're going to be around, then it's not really living a life. It's a lot of going according to thoughts, which, as I say, as helpful as they are as well, a lot of what's happening as far as our thoughts are outward in, are external beliefs we're given about ourselves and others, are values that other people have given us, are values that we're reading about and seeing that we ought to pursue. So rather than having the dominant function of thoughts and being cut off from what we feel in our bodies, we want thoughts, feelings, body, behaviour all to have equal power, all to be listened to equally, all to be taken into account. They're all providing information all the time for us, which we need to be processing and then making decisions, taking them all into account so that they're working in alignment. How do we do this? Well, we need to ask ourselves what we're feeling. So again, it's getting curious, like we did about thoughts. We need to, whenever we can, be checking in with what we're feeling in our bodies. Know which sensations, which bodily sensations are which feelings. So if we want to enhance love and joy, what do they feel like in your body? We need to connect thoughts and the body here. What does gratitude feel like in the body? What does excitement feel like? If you want to do things that give you more aliveness, so we don't go for those behaviours and substances, what things do that in your body? Where do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel excitement? So which bodily sensations are which feelings? I saw a newspaper article once where people plotted out on a body where they felt particular feelings, and there's a very significant degree of overlap with human beings where they feel love in their bodies, where they feel anger, where we feel fear. And if you talk to other people about it, I think you would probably see that. But in relationship with self, connecting with self, knowing myself, knowing my feelings, I need to know where I feel them and then give them a name in my head. So know when I'm having that particular physiological sensation, to know that that's anger, to know when I'm having that one, to know that that's love. And then allowing them generally, based on thoughts, and I'll say the same thing about feelings, that there are certain ones which are helpful and we're going to be deliberately and consciously enhancing the connection ones, and there are others that we need to manage more. We need to take the message from them, notice they're happening, take the message from them, but we probably need to manage them. The unhelpful anxiety of dominant threat, the anger that feeds itself, hatred, those kind of things. So, but we're not making feelings positive and negative. Talked about that in the context of thoughts, and there's toxic positivity to say that we shouldn't think particular things, we shouldn't feel particular things. That's the same territory as during early experience of, suck it up, smile and the world smiles with you, cry and you cry alone, those kind of messages. We don't want to be cutting ourselves off from any feeling. Certainly we want to be managing certain ones which are unhelpful for us, so rather than them being 3 hours in our being, they will be 20 minutes, but we don't want to be making any feelings wrong or trying not to feel feelings. We want to allow them so they can come into consciousness, so that we can take their messages, so that we can see what it is that they're trying to show us, and if necessary, change our behaviour, do different things, be around different people based on the messages that they're giving us. Tearfulness, just mentioned that earlier, but just to say a bit more about that now. If you're looking at one of those feelings, which is very often one that we come away from during early experience, as I say, anger is a big one where people get disconnected from it and have a disconnected relationship to our detriment throughout life. But sadness, I think, self-sorrow, that tearfulness for self would really be one of them that I would see. The vast majority of people, when they start to cry, will say sorry before they do it or whilst they're doing it. And if I ask them the physical sensations of crying, what comes up with it, it will be a tightness in the throat. And I may be wrong. There may be some physiological reasons why sadness does that. But I think what's often happening for people is they've got into the habit of when they feel sadness coming up. I say coming up because love, sadness, I think are felt across here for a lot of people. When it starts to come up, this tightens because we were given the message that it's not okay, to cry, that we need to stop doing that because it's babyish, and we need to be strong and we need to grow up, or whatever that might be. So people physiologically hold themselves and hold their bodies in a way which I think traps sadness, tearfulness down and pushes it down. As adults now, what I would like you to do is to breathe into sadness when it comes up, to make it bigger. It's a connection feeling for me. Love, gratitude, joy, make it bigger. Really feel it in the body and expand it in the body as well. So breathe into it. And this encourages the connection. This grows the connection. If that's about tearfulness now, or certainly about tearfulness about things that happened in the past too. If we're looking at feeling empathy for self now, looking at that loving self, when you have empathy for yourself in the past, certain difficult things that you've experienced in the past, I think tears are going to come with that for you. And, even if they're felt 20 or 30 years after the actual experience, they're still there. They still need to be felt. So I really would allow yourself to do that. As I say, generally with connection feelings, we're going to lean into them, savor them, try and enhance them and experience them throughout the body. If you're looking at those threat and dominant reward feelings, again, the key is just to notice what you feel. Notice when they're coming up. Notice if you feel fearful, where you feel that. If you feel irritated or annoyed, where you feel that, and around whom. A lot of the messages, again, of dominant reward, these status ones, you might be around people who have status that meets that dominant reward need, who have the money, fame, whatever that might be, despite the fact that you may not actually like them very much. And, we can make decisions despite our feelings, of course. We can decide to be around people for a particular reason, even though we might not like them very much. We would want to do that as a consistent pattern of behaviour, but for certain reasons we're going to. As adults, need to be in situations where we don't feel all the time like we want to be there, situations we may not want to be in, people we may not want to be around. But the point I'm making is, if as a pattern of behaviour we're doing that because we're valuing status or money or promotion or whatever it might be over what we're feeling as a pattern of behaviour, then I think our feelings will fight back. We don't expect to be happy and content and be in that calm and alive state if we're consistently making decisions and engaging in behaviours and being around people who don't feel good, who don't regulate us, who don't give us that sense of passion and excitement. Not everybody will do all the time, of course they won't, but we're talking about, as I say, patterns. We're talking about more often than not. So notice, as I say, where you feel the fear, where you feel the anger. If we're talking about the connection feelings as well in the context of dominant reward, the great thing about noticing more where you feel gratitude, where you feel love and enjoyment and pleasure, and enhancing them and making those feelings bigger, the more you're doing that, the less likely you are to go towards those behaviours and substances to change your state and to regulate you. Because as we've already said, in the context of those addictive behaviours and substances, that's all we're doing. We're trying to stop feeling something. We're trying to avoid feeling something. We just want to feel better. Human beings just want to be in that calm and alive state, that place of homeostasis. We want to regulate ourselves, and that's often what we're doing with the behaviour or substance. So the more ways that we can do that internally by enhancing these connection feelings, by feeling love, by deliberately feeling it, imagining it. Imagine someone you love and then bring that feeling into the body. Imagine things you're grateful for. Bring memories of excitement from the past, memories of loved ones from the past. Bring those things into your everyday, deliberately and consciously do that. And the more you're doing that, the better you feel inside, the less likely you are to go for those behaviours and substances, because you don't need to change your state in that situation. As far as talking about your feelings, I'm going to come on to communicating feelings in the focus and communication video towards the end of these steps. But at this stage, what tends to happen often when somebody talks about their feelings is they'll talk about thought. So they might say, I felt like I wasn't welcome, or I felt like it wasn't the job for me, or I felt like this was the person for me, whatever it might be. Rather than a feeling there, what somebody's gone on to say is a thought. That this isn't the job for me is a thought. The feeling would be nervousness or annoyance or boredom. So feelings are one word, as I say: anger, fear, love, disappointment, frustration, annoyance, rage, pleasure, gratitude. It's one word. You might feel a mixture of feelings. They might come relatively quickly after another. You might love somebody one minute, they say or do something which you dislike, and you might feel like you hate them within minutes. But feeling is one word. Again, another way in which we can overcomplicate feelings is how we communicate them. And this isn't necessarily just about in communication with other people, and I will talk about that in the focus and communication video later on. This is about relationship with self. This is about knowing myself. So this is about my internal dialogue around my feelings. This is about narrating what I'm feeling internally, empathizing with myself. So I'm talking about saying to myself, oh, I notice I'm annoyed about that. I notice I'm angry, or I notice I'm feeling love. So as far as communicating that internally with ourselves, knowing what we're feeling, as I say, it's one word. Maybe 10 of them within 20 minutes as far as feelings, but each feeling itself is one word. Rather than saying we're emotional or upset, again, I would say emotional is an umbrella term for feelings or emotions. Again, the distinction between feelings and emotions, I think there is a distinction. I don't distinguish, but I did read an article once where somebody did, and I'm sure there are good reasons, but I use the term interchangeably, really. So when I talk about emotions, I talk about feelings. So when somebody says I'm emotional, I think it's important to say what the emotion is, what the feeling is that you're feeling. And again, this is about in relationship with myself. Upset, the same thing. People will say that person was upset, or I feel upset. Am I sad? Is that what I mean by upset? Sorrowful? Annoyed? What I might be saying is my nervous system is upset, is I've become dysregulated. But again, just that clarity around feelings and around what the feeling is that I'm experiencing. And you can have a look on, if you Google lists of feelings, there are hundreds of feelings words that human beings have come up with to describe these states. So, some people will print them out and have a list of feelings and be able to identify them depending on what's happening. All that can be really helpful at this stage for clarity around what we feel and having that relationship with them, and so importantly, getting language around them. As I say, mixing up feelings, thoughts means that the language that we have isn't clear, and that's at this stage talking to myself, but that will also follow through in not being clear when I'm trying to communicate my feelings in language to other people. So at this stage, let's really try and get a language internally that really seems to sum up and capture what I'm feeling in any moment. Other more formal ways to improve relationship with feeling, There's journaling. It's a big thing at the moment. Be writing down thoughts, writing down feelings, just that stream of consciousness. Again, as I said, developing that observing part of us that's so important, to put it out on paper, to see it written on paper, is having a relationship with it, is getting some distance from it, not to deny it, but to have a relationship with it. So journaling each day, what you're feeling. Some of these journals, are very structured. They will ask specific feelings that you're having, times that you felt happy, times that you felt annoyed, or you just do the free flow of thoughts and feelings. Again, very, an important way to develop that relationship. To develop the language. If you're writing it, you're developing language around it as well. In a childhood experience where your feelings weren't important, where you had to put your feelings out of the way, not only were you not feeling them, or you were disconnected from feelings, or thought that certain feelings were wrong or problematic, or you should be ashamed of them, or whatever it might be. What of course goes along with that is that not only do you not know what you feel, that's the primary step, but therefore you can't communicate it. And in order to get your emotional needs met in a relationship, which I'm going to come on to, whether that's friendships or romantic relationship, we need to be able to communicate it. So we need language around feelings, and that's what this will be developing as well. And then there are apps too, which are great. There are particular apps, if you can just Google it, apps which look at and ask you to check in with feelings throughout the day, and they'll remind you to do that. Perhaps you'll press a particular colour. There's one years ago that I saw called Moodscope, and that would have playing cards with particular feelings on it, and you would just tap whatever the feeling was that day or that moment. Again, it doesn't matter what the feeling is. It's not making feelings right, not making feelings wrong in this situation. It's just developing your connection with your felt experience, knowing what you feel, knowing that you feel. Because although people might be having lots of feelings, there isn't that connection between mind and body. It was never important to register what was happening here in here. As I say, some people come away from feeling anything at all. There are certain people absolutely that don't feel anything. But I think for a lot of us, it's just that we are feeling things all the time. It's just the connection, the sort of part of the brain that registers what's happening here. Just hasn't got the energy, or wasn't given the energy during childhood and during past experience, and that's what we're changing now. So journaling, apps really help with that. And then just to finish off, emotional needs inventory. Most of us will be able to say the financial needs that we have, the physical needs that we have, heat, food, shelter. But if I ask people what their emotional needs are, what it is they need emotionally, often, as I've probably said this in the past, but in one of the videos, but they will say about to love and be loved. And we've already gone through what that actually means. And if that's going to be your primary emotional need, if it's going to be the one that you name, we must know what love is. We must know, therefore, how that need is going to be met as far as qualities, both in myself, but also with other people. But the thing is, there are lots of other emotional needs which we have as well. Do I feel safe in all major areas of my life? Am I achieving things that I'm proud of? Am I being intellectually challenged? Do I have a good friend, close friend? Am I in an intimate relationship? And again, people may name some of these, but what I've done is capture a list of those emotional needs in a document, and I've put a link to that below this video. So what I'd like you to do after this video, whenever you get the time, is to have a look at that and to go through it and just ask to give a mark out of 10 for the extent to which these emotional needs are being met. And the idea behind that is if something's getting a 4 or 5, then it's understandable that you're going to be experiencing an emotional symptom like anxiety, because if we aren't able to take care of our emotional needs because we've lost connection with what we're feeling or the importance of it, that does leave us unsafe psychologically in life. We're going to be frustrated, we're going to be switched off, we're going to be frightened. If I don't know what to go towards and come away from, that leaves me psychologically unsafe in life, and therefore experience emotional symptoms. So the idea behind this list is to look at where you are, as I say, do an inventory as far as these various different emotional needs, and then think about how you could increase a particular emotional need. So if something has got 3 or 4 out of 10, how would you bring that up to a 5 or 6? We're not talking about jumping everything to a 10. As I said in relation to change through in the earlier video, these are just small steps. How could you raise something from a 4 to a 5? Also, you may be surprised that certain emotional needs are being quite well met. As I've talked in the past about gratitude, what that dominant threat place does is bring our attention to problems, and we take for granted the good things in life, the things that we have that we wouldn't change. So something which you might notice when you do the emotional needs inventory is actually you have some needs that are very well met at the moment. So then that will help you, in terms of your internal state, put you in that more of that calm and alive place, hopefully, and reduce anxiety, reduce that feeling of a lack of safety in life. And you can see that you are taking care of certain needs, and you have in the past certainly been able to do that, which is hopefully building your sense of worth, sense of value, your sense of your own competency there. So have a look at that. I hope you find that helpful and interesting. That's the end of this video. So the next video is just finishing off on knowing yourself and talking about body and behaviours, and I shall see you there.